I took the first night shift alone. Caleb was 2 floors down, passed out in the bunk room with his boots still on. He said he'd be up in a bit, but he wouldn't. The man could sleep through a freight train. So it was just me, the tower, and the ocean, stretching out in every direction like a sheet of black glass. That was the first thing that felt off. The wind was steady, maybe 15 miles an hour, enough to push spray over the rocks. But the water didn't move the way it should have. No texture, no chop, no rhythm. Just a flat, glossy surface that reflected the beacon like a clean mirror. I watched it for a moment, waiting for a wave to break the pattern. Nothing did. I tried not to overthink it. First night always feels strange. Your body doesn't trust the dark yet. I sat at the console and started a routine sweep through the camera feeds, 12 angles, 1 full rotation around the outer deck. Everything looked fine until I hit camera 3. The timer stuttered, froze mid-second, hung there, then slid backward like someone quietly rewound a tiny piece of time. A breath later, it corrected itself and kept running smooth like nothing had happened. I waited for another hiccup, but the feed held steady. Just a glitch, I told myself. Cold air hits the wiring out here. The metal expands, contracts, does whatever it wants. You learn not to argue with the tower. I leaned back in the chair and wrote a quick note in the log. Minor delay on cam 3. Nothing dramatic, nothing worth waking Caleb over. That's when I heard it. A single footstep in the hallway behind me. Not a creak, not the building shifting. A step. Soft, slow, human. I spun around so fast the chair rolled into the console. The hallway was empty. The lights were steady. The hatch door at the far end was locked the way I left it. I waited, listening for another step, another scrape, anything. The tower stayed quiet. Metal settling, I muttered. The words sounded stupid as soon as I said them. I logged the noise anyway. Part of the job. Write down the weird stuff so you don't forget it later. I had just finished the sentence when I heard something else, this time from the stairwell below. A voice, my voice, low, thin, drifting up the metal shaft. Frankie. Barely a whisper, like someone calling me from 2 floors down. I froze. My hands went cold. Then instinct kicked in. I grabbed the flashlight and walked to the stairs. The metal grating echoed under my boots as I looked down the shaft. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. The only sound was the ocean tapping the rocks far below. Everything was exactly where it should have been. I told myself I was just tired. But looking back, that was the very first sign. Most mornings out here start the same way. I wake up before the beacon shuts off, stretch out the stiffness in my back, and check whatever piece of equipment decided to complain overnight. Routine keeps you sane. That's what they told us on the mainland. Out here, it's more than that. Routine is the only thing that reminds you you're still on the right side of reality. First job, lamp check. I climb up the spiral stairs to the top deck and look at the lens. The salt dries on the glass overnight, so I wipe it down and inspect the motor that rotates the beacon. If that motor hesitates even once, it means a long day of rewiring. After that, I check the pressure seals on the east hatch. The wind hits that side the hardest, and the air leaks change depending on how the metal flexes. I test the batteries, listen for the hum of the backup generator, glance at the breaker panel, and then make a slow walk around the outer deck to see what the night left behind. Nothing ever feels exactly the same from one day to the next. The sea shelf doesn't allow that. The tower sits on a lonely rock formation about 14 miles off the Northern California coast. We're too far for passing boats to hear us, too close for the Coast Guard to forget we exist. It's a strange in-between. On clear days, I can almost see the mainland, just a soft outline if I squint. Most days, it's all fog and empty horizon. People think lighthouse work is peaceful. They imagine waves, gulls, long sunsets. They don't mention the quiet, the kind of quiet that follows you into your lungs, or the way isolation bends time until each hour feels the same shape and color. Caleb handles it differently. He talks, a lot. By noon, he's usually awake and pacing circles around the generator room, muttering theories about shipwrecks, old diving stories, superstitions fishermen used to swear by. He reads too much folklore for his own good. I keep telling him that half the stuff he quotes came from drunk sailors in the 70s. He says that doesn't make it untrue. I tell him people say a lot of things when they're bored and surrounded by water. He grins, shrugs, and keeps talking. That's our dynamic. He fills the silence, and I don't argue unless I have to. One afternoon, during lunch, he mentioned the disappearances again. In this region, he said, tapping the map with a grease-stained finger, boats don't just wreck, they vanish. No distress calls, no debris, no oil slick, nothing. I kept eating. Strong currents, I said. Come on, Frankie. Strong currents don't erase a ship. I let it go. Caleb always has some theory, and if I try to refute all of them, I'd never get anything done. Besides, the radio said storms were moving in later that week, which meant more maintenance checks. I didn't have the energy for his stories. The next morning changed the rhythm. I was on the lower deck checking a loose panel when I heard Caleb shouting from the west rail. He rarely shouts, so I jogged over. He was kneeling by the edge, reaching for something floating between the rocks. "Grab his arm!" he yelled. A man lay face down in the water, barely gripping a broken plank. His hands were torn up from the surf. I leaned down, caught his wrist, and with Caleb's help, hauled him onto the deck. He coughed hard, spit seawater, and pressed his back against the railing like he wasn't sure what was solid anymore. His name was Rick. He looked around like he expected the ocean to climb up and take him back. We wrapped him in a blanket and gave him water. When he could finally talk, he said the same thing 3 times before we understood him. "I hurt myself," he whispered, below the water, calling me, like I was already down there. Caleb shot me a look that said, "See? I'm not crazy." I ignored it and focused on Rick. "You were disoriented," I said. "Cold water does that, messes with your head." But Rick shook his head hard, like denying it made it more real. "I know my own voice," he said. "We kept him in the supply room to warm up. He slept most of the day. I figured exhaustion and panic explained everything. The mind pulls tricks when you're inches from drowning." Caleb didn't buy it. "He heard an echo," he said later. "Of himself," I replied. "People hallucinate under stress." "Not like that," Caleb insisted. I let him talk. It didn't change the fact that we had work to do. That night, during the evening camera sweep, something hit me hard enough in the chest that I forgot to breathe. Camera 5 showed the outer deck, the one I'd walked not even 10 minutes earlier. The wind was calm, rails clear, nothing out of place. Then a shape stepped into frame. My shape, same jacket, same stance, same turn of the shoulders. He walked along the deck with a slow, easy gait, like a man out for air. And then he faded out at the edge of the frame. Not walked out, just slipped away. I blinked, leaned closer, rewound the feed. Nothing unusual showed up. The playback was clean. My double was gone. When I went to check the deck, the door I'd locked earlier was cracked open by an inch. I pushed it shut and stood there for a long moment, listening to the wind, the waves, the low groan of the tower's steel bones. Everything felt too normal in a way that made my skin crawl. Life went on after that. We ate. We talked. We did our checklists. But something in the rhythm of this place had changed. Small things. Hairline cracks you'd only notice if you lived out here long enough. and I kept telling myself the same thing. Stay rational. Stay grounded. Don't let the weird stuff mean anything. Not yet. Rick stayed with us for 3 days, long enough to look human again, long enough for his skin to warm up and his eyes to stop darting at every sound. We kept him in the supply room where it was dry and out of the wind. Caleb checked on him constantly. I checked on him enough to feel responsible, but not enough to get attached. You try not to, out here. People drift in and out of the sea shelf like ghosts. The morning he vanished, nothing felt strange, not at first. I went down with a thermos of coffee, pushed the door open with my elbow, and saw the blanket folded on the cot. Too neat for someone who left in a hurry. The door wasn't forced. Nothing was knocked over. His boots were gone. So were the spare gloves we gave him. But the floor... The metal floor was streaked with wet footprints, bare footprints, leading from the cot to the hallway, then to the stairwell, then up toward the outer deck. I followed them, up one flight, then another. The prints were spaced out as if he walked slowly, calmly, like he wasn't afraid, like he was listening to something. At the top, the trail stopped right at the west rail. The farthest edge of the deck, where the wind hits the hardest and the rocks below catch whatever the ocean decides to throw back. The rail was damp, not soaked, just touched by water. The waves didn't reach that high. Couldn't reach that high. "Rick!" I called out over the side. Nothing. Not a voice, not a splash, just the empty breath of the sea shelf. Caleb ran up behind me, panting hard. "Where is he?" "Gone," I said. "He panicked, climbed up here, probably slipped." Caleb stared at the trail of footprints. "No, look at them. He wasn't running." "Shock messes with people. He didn't sleep well. Frankie," Caleb cut in. "He said he heard himself calling from underwater, and now he's gone." This was exactly why I didn't want to feed Caleb's theories. But looking at the prints, at the rail, at that quiet ocean, I didn't have anything better to offer, so I stuck with the thing that sounded most rational. "He was confused," I said. "He probably thought he saw a boat, or lights, or maybe he heard you calling." Caleb didn't answer. He just kept staring at the water like it was staring back. We reported it to shore. Standard protocol. "Possible fall during recovery," I wrote. "Missing, presumed deceased. The Coast Guard said they'd log it. Nothing more to do. No search parties for people who disappear this far out. No good news after the first hour. We cleaned the deck, scrubbed the prints, threw out the blanket. Life carried on. But things got louder after that. Not literally, just closer. Camera 12 was the first sign. The feed slowed down, not in a glitchy way, no pixel smear, no frozen frames. It just ran slower than the others by a fraction of a second. When you watched all 12 screens at once, it felt like camera 12 was breathing behind the rest, a half beat out of sync. I checked the wiring 4 times, replaced the connection, rebooted the panel. The second the feed came back online, it lagged again. Same rhythm, same dragging of time. Like it was following something the other cameras couldn't see. Caleb started writing in his notebook. Writing, sketching, underlining, making arrows between sentences. "What are you doing?" I asked. He tapped the page. "It's a pattern. It's a busted camera." "No," he said. "It's connected to what Rick said, and the footsteps, and your double on camera 5. I didn't want to hear it. But he kept talking. "It copies us," Caleb said. "Not fully, not physically, but pieces, sounds, movements, timing, like it's learning." "Caleb. And when it has enough of a person," he said quietly, "it calls to them, pulls them somewhere." I shook my head and stood up. "You're tired. I'm tired. We've been out here too long." He didn't argue this time. That scared me more than if he had. The next incident happened the following night. We were both awake, doing separate rounds. I was on the second floor walkway, tightening a loose bolt on the railing. Caleb was in the control room watching the weather feed. I heard it before anything else. Footsteps. Climbing the metal stairwell below me, my own footsteps. Not similar, not close, exactly mine. Same weight on each step. Same slow pace I have when I'm half focused on something else. I know how I sound on these stairs. You learn your own rhythms when you've lived inside a tower long enough. But I wasn't moving. I leaned over the rail and looked down the spine of the stairwell. The metal shaft stretched all the way to the generator room, nothing blocking the view. No one was there. Nothing climbing, nothing descending, just the echo of steps that weren't happening. I stayed frozen until they stopped. Then I finished tightening the bolt because I needed to do something that made sense, something that tied me back to reality. When I got to the control room, Caleb was staring at the ocean through the window instead of the cameras. "You see that?" he asked. The water was pulling back, farther than any tide should. The dark line of wet rock stretched out like the ocean was inhaling. The surface stayed perfectly flat as it receded. No foam, no chop, no sound. Just motion without disturbance. Then it stopped. The ocean held its breath. "Tell me that's normal," Caleb whispered. "It's the shelf," I said, even though it wasn't. "Currents hit the rocks weird. Pressure shifts. Happens all the time." Caleb shook his head. "It wants you to see it." "See what?" "A path," he said. "A place to walk." I rubbed my face with both hands, trying to hold on to logic. "You're making leaps, Caleb." "Am I? Rick hurt himself underwater. You saw yourself on camera 5. Now the ocean's pulling itself apart like it's opening a door." I almost snapped at him. I wanted to, but something in his eyes made me stop. He wasn't excited. He wasn't theorizing. He was scared. That night, the fog came in heavy, so thick the beacon looked like a dying flashlight through cotton. Vision dropped to maybe 10 feet. Every sound felt closer. The kind of fog that erases the horizon and folds the whole world around you. We were in the control room going over tomorrow's maintenance plan when it happened. A voice came through the deck mic. "Caleb," one word, stretched thin, breaking at the edges. My voice. Caleb jerked his head up. "Did you hear that?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The voice came again, clearer, pressed through static. "Caleb, can you help me?" He looked at me. Really looked. My lips weren't moving. I was inches from him, but the voice was coming from outside, down on the west deck where the fog swallowed everything. "Frankie," he whispered, "are you hurt?" "I'm right here," I said quickly. "Caleb, don't." He didn't wait. He ran down the stairs, boot slamming the metal steps straight to the deck door. "Caleb, stop!" By the time I got down one flight, he had already thrown the latch open. Fog poured in like smoke. I heard him shout my name once more, thinking he was answering me. The ocean moved, not in a wave, not in a surge, in a pull. A deep, sudden, receding current yanked outward from the rocks, as if something enormous inhaled beneath the tower. The fog lit up with moisture, the air rushing past me cold and sharp. I sprinted to the deck. Too late. The rail was wet, the door was open wide. Caleb was gone, vanished in the same impossible way Rick had. Not dragged, not knocked over, just gone. Taken by a motion the ocean shouldn't be able to make. I stood at the rail, gripping the cold metal so hard my fingers went numb. And that's when I understood the pattern. The rule, it copied Rick. Rick lured Caleb. Now it had copied me, and it wanted someone else next. Caleb's disappearance turns the tower into something else. Not a workplace, not a station, a container, a shell, something the ocean presses its hands against, waiting for me to slip. I'm alone now, and the tower knows it. The first hour after Caleb vanishes, I move through the rooms without thinking, locking doors, checking windows, shutting off exterior hatches. Habit keeps my hands moving. Panic keeps them shaking. I radio shore 3 times. No answer. Not static, nothing. Silence that feels intentional. I go to the control room to run a systems check. The beacon hums above me, steady as a heartbeat. I tell myself the routine still exists. The structure still works. I still exist. Then the tremor hits. A deep, rolling shudder pulses through the tower from the base upward, the kind of vibration you feel in your teeth before you hear it. Tools on the nearby shelf rattle. The coffee mug tips over and shatters on the floor. I grab the edge of the console. "Not now," I whisper. "Please, not now." The tremor lasts only a few seconds, but it's enough. Tide pressure doesn't shift like that, not unless something massive moves beneath the rock shelf, something too big to measure, too deep to register. When the shaking stops, I force myself to look at the monitors. 11 feeds show nothing unusual. Empty decks, fog swirling, the beacon slicing through the haze in slow revolutions. Camera 12 is different. There's a figure on the west deck, standing perfectly still, facing the door. Me, same jacket, same posture, same slight slouch in the shoulders. The version of me that shows up when I'm tired and my body forgets to pretend. I lean closer to the screen. The figure doesn't move, doesn't tilt its head, doesn't breathe. A wave of cold spreads across my back. "That's impossible," I say out loud, because hearing it breaks the thought in half. As if responding, the tower goes quiet. Not quieter, silent. The wind dies instantly. The steel stops groaning. The ocean stops its endless pulse against the rocks. Everything freezes. A dead world wrapped around a live one. Then, knock, knock, 2 taps on the control room door. Soft, precise, the same rhythm every time. I nearly drop the flashlight. "No," I whisper, not answering. I'm not. Knock, knock. I back away from the door. I check the hallway through the side window. Nothing moves, nothing waits. The air doesn't even shift dust. When I turn back to the console, every monitor except camera 12 has gone black. Only the west deck remains. My double is closer now, right against the doorframe of the deck hatch, standing at the perfect angle to be looking up at me. I hit the manual lock sequence on instinct. Steel bolts slam shut across the tower's main levels. Emergency shutters clamp over the outer windows. The isolation mode kicks in with a soft electrical hum. For a moment, I feel safe. Then the monitor switches itself back on. I didn't touch it. No one touched it. The screen flickers, blinks. Then there he is, closer than before. Another blink. He fills more of the frame. Another. His face is almost pressed to the lens. My breath stutters. "Stop. Please, stop." The screen blinks once more. He's inches from the camera lens, the face blurred just enough that I can't tell what's wrong with it, only that something is wrong. Like the image was drawn from memory by someone who'd only seen me in passing. I know staying in the control room is a mistake. It's too high up, too exposed. The tower reacts like a living thing when the tide pressure changes, and I've learned to follow the vibrations. Right now, the vibrations say the water is rising. I race out the door and down the stairs toward the lower deck. The tower shakes with a low groan that climbs the metal walls like heat. When I reach the mid-level hatch, a rush of damp air hits me in the face. Water spills under the door. Not a leak, a flood. I slam the hatch open. The deck outside is already underwater. Not knee-high, neck-high. The ocean has surged upward in a vertical column, swallowing the steel walkway in seconds. What? How? A second later, the water drains just as fast, ripping outward like it's being pulled into a massive vacuum. I grab the railing as the whole deck tilts. The suction wave nearly takes my legs out from under me. My boots skid across slick metal. The pull is so strong, it drags my body toward the railing, toward the sea. I lunge and hook my arm through a steel cable. The force nearly tears my shoulder out of its socket. "Hold! Hold!" I gasp, but I'm not talking to myself. I'm talking to the tower, like it can choose to keep me or let me go. My hands rip open on the cable. The salt burns instantly. My feet lift off the ground as the suction strengthens. Water hisses past my ears. The deck groans. The whole tower leans. Then, just as suddenly, everything releases. The ocean drops. The pull disappears. The deck slams flat. I collapse onto the wet metal, coughing, staring up at the fog-smeared sky. My heartbeat fills my head like a drum. The radio on my belt crackles. Unresponsive, channels, offline. I sit up fast. Then the voice hits. "Frankie." Marlin's voice, our supervisor. He was supposed to check in 3 days ago. "Frankie, I'm outside. Open the hatch." But the way he says it, the way the sound warps. It's underwater. The vowels drag. The consonants crush under pressure. "Marlin!" I shout. "Where are you? Marlin!" The radio hisses, then repeats the same line, this time with a slight delay, as if the words bounce off something deep. "Frankie, open the hatch." A chill spreads down my spine as I realize which hatch the voice means. The west hatch, where the camera showed my double. I back away from the railing and run for the stairs. My legs feel heavy, like someone is pressing down on them. I grab the rail and pull myself up one step at a time, slipping on the wet metal. The control room doors open when I reach it. I didn't leave it open. The monitors flicker. Camera 12 cuts out completely. When the feed returns, the camera is pointing at me. But camera 12 is a fixed unit. It cannot move, it cannot tilt, it cannot turn to follow me. Yet here it is, facing me dead on, no matter where I stand in the room. I lift the radio. My hands won't stop shaking. This isn't real. This isn't real. The screen blinks again, and behind me, in the reflection on the glass, I swear I see a shape that matches my outline. Enough. I sprint across the room and slam my hand on the main breaker switch. The entire tower plunges into darkness. A sound like metal sighing echoes through the walls. The fog outside glows faintly from the residual heat of the beacon. And then, the ocean breathes again. Waves return. Wind stirs, the tower hums. Reality snaps back into place like a rubber band. I collapse against the wall, sliding down until I hit the floor. My body shakes. My hands ache. The cuts on my palms pulse with heat. The pattern is broken, not destroyed, not defeated, just interrupted. Because whatever this thing is, it wasn't trying to kill me. It was trying to finish copying me. And tonight, I didn't let it. The tower stays dark for a long time after I hit the breaker. Long enough for my eyes to adjust, long enough for the ringing in my ears to fade, long enough for the adrenaline to burn off and leave me shaking in a cold pool of exhaustion. It's strange how quiet, real quiet can be. Not the silence after a scream, not the silence when the wind dies. This is the silence after possibility stops. The ocean settles, the tower settles with it, and I sit there on the floor of the control room with the cuts on my hands pulsing like tiny heartbeats, wondering if I've finally broken something I can't put back. Eventually, I force myself up. My muscles fight me the whole way. I restart the emergency power, just enough for lights on the lower levels and minimal systems. No cameras, no auto locks, no external sensors. If the thing wants anything through tech, it's not getting it. The control room glows a weak yellow. It feels human again. I take a breath, slow and shaky, and go to Caleb's notes. He kept everything in a weatherproof binder stuffed between the toolbox and the backup charts. I don't know why, but I pick it up like it's something fragile, like it's something alive. The pages are a mess of handwriting, some rushed, some careful. Caleb underlined too many things and circled too few. There are sketches of waves, strange tide diagrams, timestamps, arrows, stray words like pattern and response and mimic. I flip through until something catches my eye. A line written in darker ink pressed hard into the page. It repeats what we repeat. I flip another page. Echo is not voice, echo is behavior. Another, it doesn't copy what we are, it copies what we do. There's a page filled with footstep diagrams, different weights, distances between them, angles of approach on the metal stairs. Caleb mapped out the sound of us walking, the sound of Rick pacing the deck, the sound of me moving across the floor of the control room, and for a moment, I see it. Not everything, not even close, but enough. I dig out Rick's ramblings from the supply room. What he scratched onto a cargo tag with shaking hands right after we pulled him up. Most of it is illegible, but one phrase repeats 3 times. It used my call, not my voice. My call. A call is action, intention, movement. My breath hitches. I sit down at the table before my legs give out. The tower creaks softly with the shifting tides below. Piece by piece, a shape forms. Not of the thing, but of its rules, its limits. I start writing them out. Rule 1. It mimics what it touches, voices, footsteps, movements, timing. Not perfectly, not fully. Like a reflection on moving water, close enough to fool you if you're tired or scared or trying too hard to understand. Rick heard his own call under the waves. Caleb heard me from the deck when I was standing beside him. I watched myself on camera 5, even though I'd never walked that part of the deck at night. It learns pieces, enough pieces to build something that looks like someone you trust or someone you are. Rule 2. It can't enter the tower. It needs the door opened. It needs you outside. Every disappearance happened after the door moved. Rick walked out calmly. Caleb opened the hatch in a panic. Even the early signs, light tapping, soft footsteps, always happened on the other side of something solid. It tests boundaries. It waits. It needs you to make the mistake. Rule 3, it controls water levels inside a limited radius. The impossible receding tide. The sudden floods, the suction wave that almost ripped my arms out of their sockets. It couldn't reach inside, so it moved the world outside. Not the whole ocean, just enough. Like hands reaching up from beneath the rock shelf, shaping currents into lures. Rule 4, it depends on routine, human routine. Footsteps repeated daily, voices used often, movement patterns, deck checks, camera sweeps, shift changes, everything we did it tracked, everything we repeated, it absorbed. Caleb wrote, "It doesn't understand us, it predicts us." My throat tightens. It doesn't want chaos. It wants rhythm, regularity. If it can map the rhythm, it can mimic the rhythm. And once it can mimic the rhythm, it can take the person inside it. I sit back staring at the 4 rules, my pulse hammering. My hands shake, but gently now. Not fear, but realization. The truth hits slow, heavy. I feel it settle in my chest. It never wanted to kill me. It wanted to finish copying me. Rick was the first link, Caleb the second. I was supposed to be the third. And after me, whoever came next. A new keeper assigned by the Coast Guard. Some kid thinking the ocean's poetic. Some man who thought he wanted a quiet job. Anyone. If I had died on that deck, if I had followed my own voice into the fog, my echo would have been the one calling the next person out. My voice, my steps, my shape, the chain would have completed. A cold wave of nausea moves through me. I grip the edge of the table until it passes. I flip through more of Caleb's notes, looking for something, anything, that hints at a weakness. There's nothing about origin, nothing about intent, nothing about what it actually is. But there's something else. A half page with a line scribbled across the center. Break the pattern, break the mimic. Not destroy it, not defeat it, just interrupt. I grab a pen and circle it 3 times. That's what I did without realizing it. When I falsified the log timings in a panic. When I pointed the cameras away from the rails. When I broke my usual loop and skipped the east deck check. When I didn't answer the calls. When I cut the power. I broke the predictability. The thing couldn't finish the chain because I stepped off the rhythm it was learning. It couldn't mimic what it couldn't map. I lean back and let out a breath that shakes my whole body. For the first time in days, I feel not safe, but alive in a way I can hold with both hands. A strange calm settles over the tower. The fog thins. The wind returns in soft pulses. I hear waves again, real ones, textured and uneven. The horizon lightens. A gray ribbon pulls across the water. Morning. I go to the radio and flip through every channel until, finally, a voice answers. "Lighthouse Station, we read you." My chest caves. I don't cry, but I feel the weight behind my eyes. "This is Frankie," I say. My voice sounds small. "I need pickup." They ask what happened. I give them the version that fits on paper. 2 men lost to tide surges, 1 missing, structural disturbances, possible equipment failure, unstable deck conditions. They tell me to stay put. A boat will come. When I step outside 2 hours later, the sea looks normal. Not calm, just alive again, multi-layered, imperfect, human. The breeze ruffles my jacket like it remembers me. The lighthouse hums the way machines hum when they're not holding their breath. I keep thinking the tower will shift, the water will flatten, the echo will return. It doesn't. Not now, not while the pattern is broken. The Coast Guard boat arrives mid-afternoon. The crew ties off ropes, climbs the ladder, asks their questions. I give them answers that won't get me institutionalized. They're kind, confused, careful around the places where the deck still shows stress fractures from the tide surge. When I finally step onto the boat, the lighthouse shrinks behind me. It looks normal. I know it isn't. I know it never was. But the ocean doesn't rise as we leave. It doesn't recede too far. It doesn't breathe in that impossible way. For the first time since all of this began, nothing tries to mimic me. Not my footsteps, not my voice, not the shape of my fear. The pattern is broken, at least for now. And that's enough for me to keep going, enough to get to shore, enough to tell the story, at least the parts anyone would believe. But the truth, the real truth, I only understand a piece of it. A fraction, a shape without edges. Whatever the echo tide is, it isn't gone. It isn't finished. It isn't defeated. It's just waiting for the next rhythm, the next voice, the next person who walks that deck in the wrong way at the wrong hour. I didn't survive because I was stronger. I survived because I stepped off the beat. And now I know enough to realize something that chills me deeper than the water ever did. This wasn't the end. It was only the first time I saw how the echo learns. They bring me to shore just after sunset. Not dramatic, not heroic, just a quiet transfer from the Coast Guard boat to a waiting SUV. I'm wrapped in a blanket even though I'm not cold. They keep asking if I'm dizzy, if I hit my head, if I remember anything before the surge. I tell them I'm fine. It's the closest thing to the truth I can give them. At the station, they lead me into a windowless room with soft lighting and a metal table. A man from the Marine Safety Office sits across from me, clicking a pen he never writes with. He asks for details. I give the version that fits the world they live in. Rick, accident at sea. Caleb, slipped during sudden swell. Marlin, lost during storm activity. 3 tragedies neatly boxed. 3 deaths the ocean will take the blame for. They don't mention anything about echoes, or impossible tides, or cameras that move on their own. They skim their notes, nod to each other, and close the file with a soft click that feels like a door shutting on everything I saw. They finish with the same line everyone uses when they don't really know what happened. You did what you could, Frankie. Some waters are just dangerous. I nod. Not because I agree, but because explaining the truth would only make them look at me the way Caleb used to look at the dark. They thank me for my cooperation. They tell me someone will drive me to temporary lodging. They leave the room, and then it's just me and the hum of fluorescent lights. I take a deep breath and step into the hallway. It's long, empty, too bright. My footsteps tap against the tile in a steady rhythm. I count them without meaning to. Routine is hard to unlearn. Halfway down the hall, the overhead lights flicker. Not a random flicker. A single clean pulse. The same pulse the beacon made when the tide shifted under the tower. I stop walking. My breath catches. Everything goes quiet except for my pulse in my ears. Then, behind me, footsteps, my footsteps. But they don't match mine. They land just a little late, just enough to be wrong, just enough to make the hallway feel smaller. I close my eyes. I know that sound too well. Then a voice drifts from the far end of the corridor. My voice, thin, filtered, like it traveled through water before reaching me. Frankie, check the west rail. My stomach drops. My hands go cold. I whisper to myself, the same way I did in the tower when panic tried to swallow me whole. It's just an echo. Don't answer. The footsteps behind me stop. The lights steady. And for a moment, just a moment, the world feels normal again. But as I walk toward the exit, I can still feel something following the rhythm of my steps. Not copying, not mimicking, learning. I don't look back. I left the lighthouse, but the lighthouse didn't leave me.